We're going to have about 200 on this call. My only job is to keep it interesting for you in the first place, so you stay awake. And the second job is to make sure that you leave with something more than you came with in terms of knowledge, understanding, whatever that looks like. So what we want to do is give you a little rundown on what we're going to talk about on this call. Three big topics. The November changes, which I'll mention early on. There is going to be a much bigger webinar on this hosted by the NBAA IOC, hosted by Mitch and Steve, and a bunch of other people coming up on the 29th. Mitch, is that right?
That would be correct. 29th at, and Doug would know probably at 1 o'clock Central Time, if I'm not mistaken.
So 2:30 Eastern, 1:30 Central.
Oh, you want me to show up a half hour early like I was in the Army?
Yes, please.
Okay, good stuff. So that's coming up the 29th, which basically means that we're going to run through a little summary of stuff for now. But don't panic, because if there's bits that you're not getting and you really want to be fully educated on these things, I humbly recommend not to listen to our stuff, but listen to that conference that's coming up on the 29th. It'll be awesome. That said, we'll give you the lowdown so that you can kind of have an idea of what's coming up. And then we'll get into some more fun stuff. Two very important people to introduce you to, which is our new team members. And then we're going to jump into audience questions, but we'll get straight into it. So here are the changes. And we made this little slide today to kind of go, okay, if everything's in a nutshell, here's what it is. Now, again, Mitch, I'm asking you to fact check all of this as I speak. And point out anything that you might think is wrong there, and in fact, anybody else. But what we're going to do in the format for this and probably future calls is I'll present this real quick, and then we'll jump into some questions about it, what we want to talk about. Essentially, I don't really have to say a whole lot. What you see is there. There's four big things. Gross nav errors, which is simple enough, comes down to 10 miles. Wake turbulence changes, which means there's a new super category worldwide. And arrival spacing into airports is not necessarily dependent on the wake turb category, but about 8 different weight categories as regards arrival spacing. The SLOP change, strategic lateral offset procedure, is essentially saying that because we've tightened up the tracks predominantly on the North Atlantic, we used to do SLOP up to 2 miles. Now they're saying if you come below 15 miles separation on the tracks, you can only SLOP up to half a mile, logically. And a reminder that there are actually 20 micro SLOP settings for you on the large one, 0.1 and so on up to 2.0. Then the biggie, which is the contingency. Those are kind of the key changes there. And really it's the fact that we did this on the North Atlantic. We started it in February of 2019. It's been working fine. Now ICAO is going to issue a new amendment to Doc 4444, which is kind of the air traffic control Bible. And this is worldwide, not just the North Atlantic. So anywhere that you're in remote or oceanic airspace, you're going to be doing a 30-degree 5-mile offset instead of a 45-15. And there are some moderate changes to the fact that there's no turnback procedure. And then the weather thing is also standardized. So as usual, picture is much better. Mitch, I apologize for some reason, the 30 West IP logo, I'm not sure why it's not on there. It should be. We worked on this together. This map is available on the website. You've probably all seen it. Dave, you might just stick a little link in the chat window there and give people the link to the kind of the main page for the changes. But this is the picture, essentially. You're on track, something goes wrong, you can't get ATC in a hurry, you need to turn now, and here's how you turn. So 5 miles off track, generally to the right. There may be a good reason for going left, I can't think of one, even though the documentation says you can do both. Up or down, unless you're descending, in which case you need to go below the tracks and then figure out what you're doing after that. So that's the thing in principle. The weather deviation, the old acronym of SAND, if you don't know SAND, it's a really good one. South of track, ascend, north of track, descend. That's essentially it. And that's the next slide. So what we'll do is stick here and I'll open it up to any questions or whoever wants to go or talk about it, all yours. Silence. Everybody.
I'll kick it off, Mark, and I'll kind of make this interactive between Mitch and myself, maybe possibly to give him fair warning. So it says 5 to 15 mile SEP, then max 0.5. Mitch, is there any way for us as pilots to know we're in 15 mile SEP?
Not now, and it's not being deployed. Guy, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not being deployed anywhere oceanic. So when we do our presentation, we're just going to highlight that, hey, this is out there. It's for the future. Doesn't affect us now. Right now, everywhere oceanic would be 2 miles and tenths of a mile.
And our hope is that there's enough forethought that once it does become used, there will be a way to let us know.
I seriously doubt it.
You seriously doubt it, Mitch?
Keep in mind that their pie in the sky goal is to have an RMP2 environment, and that would be where you'd come up with your 15-mile separation. So the next step from PBCS tracks is going to be RMP2 with an RCP of something less than 240 and an RSP of probably 180 still. So this COVID really threw a wrench into their modernization plans.
Very good. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on how the offset works? One thing that seems to come up occasionally is the idea of a turnback, and that the fact that previously there was some kind of complex procedure dictated for a turnback, and now it just says, correct me if I'm wrong, but it basically says as the situation dictates. In other words, it's up to you, get out of the way and then do something logical. Maybe they expect you to stay on the 5 miles, but any questions or thoughts on that?
The turnback is intended, as I understand it, and this, Steve and I had a discussion with some people in the FAA who are a lot smarter than we are. Let's say that I'm diverting straight ahead to Shannon. I could offset 5 miles, adjust by 500 feet or 1,000 feet as would be appropriate, go straight ahead to offset. But if I wanted to go up to Keflavik or go back to Gander, then I got to go either below 290 or above 410. And below 290 or above 410, then I would take whatever course of action. Guy, would you concur with that?
Amen. Yeah, and the safety stats of the North Atlantic are based upon you descending to 280 and then diverting off track to where you need to go. So that's their preference because it builds in nicely to how their safety stats are being compiled.
And one of the things that we'll be discussing in our webinar, but it bears talking about as much as I try and preach as much as we can. The time to figure that out is not when the you-know-what hits the you-know-what. The time to do that is probably in your about every 10 degrees, a briefing for the next 10 degrees to say, hey, here's my plan. We're going to go here. If we have a depress, obviously, then we got to get down right away. But if we have an engine failure, are we going to drift down or are we going to go down below rather quickly? So that's what I've been trying to preach, is to say we've been lulled into a sense of complacency, I think, because of CPDLC and fans, and now there's, as a result of our compliance with fans, they're sharpening the pencil as far as separation, and we got to stay on our game. So that'd be. So
on that question, I just see Nat's question, which is very appropriate. Is there anywhere that's actually running lateral separation at less than 15 nautical miles?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not oceanically.
And certainly not oceanic. There is some question about, like, South Africa has got some specific routes that allow you to do 0.5. And it was brought up that might be because of separation. But as to somebody's point, as maybe Steve's, when are you going to know? Right now, they're not telling us. It's easier if I just say these published ATS routes are 0.5. That's helpful to a pilot. If I just say to a pilot, well, if it's separation less than 15, use this. Nobody's telling him when he's being separated by less than 15.
Actually, if you look in, and a good source for this is the Jeppesen Airway Manual, and if you just do a whatever reader you use for the Jeppesen Airway Manual, so you're going to Australia and you look in, go to the Pacific and just do a search on SLOP, you'll find all the different FIR requirements for and allowances for SLOP. So one of those, I believe, is for the Australia. They will tell you the routes and say SLOP intense up to 0.5, but so that's probably the only place you can find that now.
Makes sense. Okay. Tim says it'd be nice if SLOP was simply assigned during the oceanic clearance. That's, yeah, pretty good suggestion. When it comes to it that we have less than 15 on particular tracks, I think that makes sense. And Mike
Zoom meeting
would work too, you know. So
then it wouldn't be SLOP, it would be TLOP for tactical if they assigned it.
wow.
Well, they do in
Didn't have
China.
the same ring.
Well, I guess it would be. Yeah, okay, I won't get into that. You're right, Steve.
No, no, and we talk about this also. I mean, 1 mile right is overused. Let's just put that out there.
How'd it go?
Yeah.
And so different places have different techniques. You know, even day of the month, you do 2. Odd day of the month, you do 1. Captain's leg, you do 1. Co's leg, you do 2. You know, there's different things to make sure that you're varying, but.
Yeah, on that, do we have any SLOP 0 fans here? This comes up every time we talk about SLOP and whether SLOP 0 or SLOP or not, but.
Well, Mark, it's not here. I think I want to point to, you know, when we're talking about tenths of a mile, and I am not familiar with what the Airbus FMS does or what Collins is doing, but the Honeywell FMS, if you offset 0.2 of a mile, your CPDLC and ADSC is not reporting that you're offset 0.2 of a mile. It is
Got it. Okay.
1 mile. So
Got
you
it.
offset 2 tenths, 3 tenths, 4 tenths, 5 tenths, doesn't matter. Your
Got it.
report will say you're offset 1 mile.
I'll rebroadcast that for you because you sound like, Nat, I'll rebroadcast that for you because you sound like you're in an aquarium. Sure, your audio there is off, but Nat is basically saying if you're running a small amount of an offset, depending on the FMS, it might not report to ATC that you are slopping. Is that correct?
Well, it will report your slopping. It just won't report that you're in a tenth of a mile. It will report that you are. It'll report that you are 1 mile. So if you are.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it won't report that you're 0.3. It'll say 0. It'll if you're 0.7, it'll say 1. Okay, cool. Something to be aware of. Cyril also says that China does assign offsets. That's correct. So if you're over there, you will get told what to fly. But for the most part, and again, for the most part, we're always really talking about the North Atlantic and then maybe the North Pacific. It's up to you to decide. But I think the group consensus, having discussed this many times, is don't do SLOP 0. And the next worst one after SLOP 0 is SLOP 1. Pick something that, you know, if you can and the aircraft can do it, do something different.
The advice we get often from the people who are really smart is SLOP 0 is for people who don't have offsets. That's who does SLOP 0. If your airplane doesn't have an offset capability, then you use centerline because you don't have it, and then that allows everybody with an offset to pick a position.
Well, that's a fair point. Okay.
Спасибо, товарищ.
Go ahead, Steve.
I just said it. Спасибо, товарищ. Some of the old Russian freighters may not have that capability.
True. Dennis would like to make a comment. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, a couple of things here. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you great. How you doing, Dennis?
Very good. Thanks, Mark. A couple of things that come to mind here. SLOP 0, as Mitch said, or Steve, I can't recall, are for non-programmable FMCs. it is a form of SLOP because we don't want anybody going out, heading a select into the ocean and forgetting where they're at and drifting off as winds and whatnot will do. 1 or 2, right, is the preferred, and it is, I forget who mentioned it, the random, you know, it's not every time I fly, I do 2 or 1 or whatever. And what it is, and those are the numbers that the FAA Tech Center uses to come up with their probabilities for collisions and things like that. Now, with regard to turnbacks with contingencies of 5 miles and stuff like that, and ever-changing separation standards, even there was not a when we're 50 mile, there was not a big to do about just making a 180-degree turn. The FAA has done a study recently, not recently, maybe a couple of years ago, on large airplanes flying at 8.4, 35, 37,000 feet. Takes 23 nautical miles roughly to make a 180-degree turn. So you can see if we had a 50-mile separation and both were doing it to the right, you know, going different directions, it could be a problem, especially, you know, if you're climbing or whatever, or somebody's off altitude. So with the reduced separation, the preferred way and the way you should do it, I think Mitch mentioned it, is to go below the 28.5, basically, the net high level. If you're in the ocean there, if you're in the Pacific, 29 is kind of your number to go below. Now, I will tell you that I see a lot of international flights and watch specifically in simulators how people do contingency procedures. You can talk about them all day long. And you get in a simulator and they do them wrong. So I forgot who mentioned it. It's more than talk. It's really drilling down and being ever so mindful of exactly what needs to be, particularly when you're faced with an emergency, an engine failure, depressurization. All crap breaks loose at that point, and they forget what they're. The most important thing, you know, obviously to a well-trained crew is the QRC. We got to get to the QRC. Well, there are also, with engine failure, there's plenty of time to make turns and implement things, but that's the coordination that you use in the CRM between the two pilots. Many people will have kind of a controlled card that goes in the airplane, that goes on the back of a checklist or something with exactly those types of familiarity with contingencies. And with the next change in the Quad 4 and whatnot coming in November, everything is going to be harmonized between the fleets. The one thing that I think you need to worry about is that we, I should say, need to worry about is the ever shrinking separation that with the ASIPs and stuff like that, with I think the FAA in the future will probably start adopting that and integrating it into their separation standards. And as I think Mitch mentioned RNP2, that is, it's going to happen someday. And there will be discussions on them from the FAA standpoint, but knowing what standards are in effect where you're at is going to be a big problem, one that we have to worry about, all of us, you know, because that has yet to be solved. So,
great. Okay, thank you, Dennis. That's awesome. And you're hearing it from the horse's mouth there. If anyone's going to know what's being seen, and most interestingly of all, I would say, if anyone's going to know when it goes wrong, what happens. So I think of all those comments, the most interesting is the comment about how the procedures are actually flown in the simulator when there's 100 other things going wrong. So I'm just going to share back up this PowerPoint again and this little wee map. Now, I'm not saying this is the map that you need to look at. It's just the one that we did. There are different ones. But what I will say is, for an emergency on the ocean, you really want to know that all of this stuff is kind of here in your head, you know, like motor memory almost, that you're like, yeah, I got it. I know I'm going right. I'm going up, down, I'm going 5 miles, whatever, because you have all the other things to worry about. Like when we draw up the graphic and we go, in the case of an emergency, this is not, you know, the first thing you're going to be worrying about, but it's a very important thing. So whatever way you're doing it, whoever your recurrent is, however you're doing it, you want to make sure that this thing is ingrained in your memory. And yes, I know that there's 500 things to know about crossing the ocean, but most importantly is what to know when it goes wrong. Some of the other stuff you've got time to figure out.
Can I comment on that, Mark?
Yeah, please do.
The one thing, and one thing I think for all the participants here, one of the largest pilot deviations is you're looking at it right here. People with CPDLC, ADSC, the controller will be able to see exactly when you left that altitude. If you start down before 5 nautical miles, they'll know it. You will get a call. You'll tell them, they'll fill out a form, and you'll have to justify what you did. If there's no loss of separation, it's not quite so bad, but you just never know. And this happens all the time. We investigate them all the time. And it's because people just don't realize that Big Brother, that being the Shanwick and whatnot, they're all out there looking at you. They have to. So that's all.
That's very true. Very true. It's not like the old days where you had HF and a hot flask of coffee and that was about it. So yeah, very different these days. Back to the November 5 changes in this kind of group of things. And again, you have the opportunity to join Steve and Mitch for their presentation on this, but is there anything that we could address in this, or any questions around this particular thing that you haven't got to yet? I'm not seeing any more in the chat window. Feel free to unmute yourself if you got a quick question on this, or else we will move on a little bit. Okay, we can come back to this if there's more questions. We have a bunch of stuff to get through. The thing that I want to go to next is safe airspace. And what I'll do, actually, I'll just move on one slide. This is kind of a picture that we took today of the Middle East situation, and never a dull moment, always something changing. But the ones that we want to tell you about real quick, Armenia and Azerbaijan. This is a new conflict zone that many of you will perhaps not be aware of, but it is important to be aware of. So the conflict region is kind of right in the center, close to the border between the two, obviously, but it's the Nagorno-Karabakh region that will, you know, if you remember the early 90s, there was a conflict there. That's really fired up. There's a lot going on there. It's a very real conflict, and you do not want to be in the vicinity. Exactly how close you want to be to it, that's for you to kind of get into and research and understand. Safeairspace.net is the OpsGroup place for you to go and do that. You can access that through the dashboard, or just go direct to safeairspace.net for a kind of slimmed down version of things. The other changes of late are two. So I'll go back to the previous slide if I can. So Iraq, not a lot of people going over Iraq, but some are. The update basically is that the FAA are rescinding the SFAR that says you can't. So now it's going to say you can, but that's just the SFAR. The NOTAM still says no. So ultimately, it doesn't matter what's in the SFAR, it says 320 or above. If you're a US operator, you cannot go into Iraqi airspace. That makes it easy. But to show you the differences internationally, Canada agrees with the United States and says no, but Germany, France, and the UK say yes, but only above a certain altitude. This is a long discussion about how high is safe enough and what's the real risk and so on. But that's the update on Iraq. And then Ukraine, little update on Ukraine. Basically, the Black Sea routes, which is the Crimean Peninsula and the Black Sea itself, is okay again from the 27th in about 5 days' time. The Dnipro FIR, which is the most easterly of all the FIRs in Ukraine, is not. So I'll go back to the map again just to kind of show you where that sits. So if you kind of look up the top there, this area here at the bottom of the red is the Crimean Peninsula. Essentially, you can cross over the whole Black Sea if you want to. And the reality of the risk is that there isn't much of a risk compared to places like Armenia and Azerbaijan. This is a historical conflict. It is technically still ongoing, and there are sporadic things happening. Again, go to your service provider to get the latest facts on this. But as a broad line overview, the whole Crimea thing is relatively political and also historical. The true risk is not hugely there when you take into account the other risks in the Middle East. So it's not that big a deal. Any questions on that? I'll stop sharing that and I'll just check the chat window and see if anyone has come up with that. So Dave has put in the link there, safeairspace.net. And I'll just run back through the questions. Oh, there was one quick question, by the way, on the previous thing. SLOP. Do you slop on a random route? Comes up regularly. The answer is yes. Lots of shaking heads from the old wise people here. That's the answer there. Okay.
Hey, Mark, another question is, if you're slopping 1 mile and you do a contingency, do you add 5 miles to the one, or do you go off the center line? Go off the center line.
You go off the center line. You go off the center line. I'm speaking authoritatively on that, and I'm not sure, but I believe that's the answer. The 5 miles is 5 miles from that original track. So if you're going from, let's say, 53 north 15 west to 53 north 20 west, and you're bang on, you decide to offset by 2 miles, something goes bang, you've only got 3 miles left to go. How's that sound?
There you go, on target.
Okay, good man. Righto, back to that little map and COVID. Who knew? Still going on. This is today's map from Europe. So we're going to talk specifically about Europe on this call because a lot of questions about, can I get in? Can I not get in? How do we go? What's the situation? The situation is that it's very, very developing at the moment in terms of the numbers and what the impact is and so on. That picture shows you a pretty good kind of map of what's where in Europe, and the countries that are not in red and the areas of the countries that are not in red are kind of pretty okay for now. Germany is kind of a standout. Germany has been a standout throughout the whole thing. It's had a way lower rate of both infection transmission and ultimately the fatality than other states around. The UK, for some reason, has come up grey in this particular map. Not entirely sure why. There might be a data issue, but it's pretty red. Hey, Dave, it's as red as anything else.
Belgium as well.
Oh, Belgium is grey. That's just because Belgium is.
But they're getting hit hard too.
They are. Everywhere's getting it. Everywhere's getting it. But Germany is good. Norway is good. Sweden for the moment is good, but we'll see how that goes. The Baltic states obviously are pretty okay. Greece, strangely, has very good looking colors there. But look, this is a rough picture. It's changing rapidly. I just saw a lockdown announced for the Czech Republic, which has had in the last week or 2 weeks the highest transmission rates in Europe. It's a real concern. They did pretty well through the whole thing, and now it's a biggie. Ireland has gone into a level 5 lockdown, which is their highest, I think, as of tonight. So this is changing rapidly. Bottom line is, if you are thinking about going to Europe, keep a really good eye on those headlines and statuses. Dave did an article for the blog about a week ago on how to get the latest for each European country. So if you go to the blog, you'll see that, and it says how to get COVID info. There are a couple of things to talk about, I think, with getting into Europe. Dave, are you with me?
I am, yeah.
Good man. Okay. When you
posted that link in there.
Oh yeah, good. Okay, great. So we had a little discussion earlier on about how to best talk about this in a nutshell. Basically, if you're a European citizen, and we're talking about the EU countries, which is not necessarily Schengen, but the EU itself, you're free to roam. So if you're in the States and you want to go to Europe, there's nothing to stop you going to Europe. If you're in the States and your wife is American, but you're European, as is my case, nothing to stop you doing that either. That's fine. Really, the most questions come around, okay, I'm not European, I don't have the passport. Can I operate? Can I go? What do you reckon, Dave?
In general, no, not really. Unless for, in most cases, an essential reason. So yes, family is often considered one of those essential reasons. All kinds of other things, but most places, essential reasons are the things you would generally consider. You know, you're a diplomat, or you're attending a funeral, or stuff like that. Not really, I want to go on holiday. Sometimes, if you've got a business trip, some countries include that.
Yeah, that's
part
a
of the
key
criteria.
point, exception, and that will obviously, we're talking to a lot of corporate operators here. A lot of countries, Portugal, Spain, I believe Germany, Italy, have an exemption that says if you have essential business, or your principal does, or whoever's on board, then yeah, that's fine. But you need a letter to say that. If you're drilling down into the specifics for Europe, one thing I want to highlight is the Universal Weather blog. They have a really good page on this for Europe, country by country, with specifics on you know, what letters are required and how to get it. As with anything, it is changing all the time, but that's a good place to look, and then go to Dave's article for a kind of wider overview. But in principle, that's kind of it. The message really is, if you don't have essential business in Europe, don't go to Europe. If you're within Europe, different story. Now, the other thing I want to address, and we kind of had a little bit of a discussion about this earlier, about the ethics of it, but there are some, what we might call backdoor routes into Europe, or dodgery ways of getting in. We're not advocating it, but you will eventually come to understand this. France is an exception in Europe. France doesn't really care where you come from, but it does care where the aircraft comes from. And that's different to most countries in Europe. So what a lot of people have been doing is this idea of going to London, for example, go to Stansted, clear customs, and then fly on to France. I think that's still an option. I'm not saying you should use it to flout the rules. It obviously is a serious situation, but you should be aware that you may find that there's a legal way of doing that. Iceland has been used for the same purpose. Go to Keflavik, clear, Iceland's in Schengen, or at least part of the wider zone, and carry on. You know, once you start getting into the specifics of it, it is complex, but there may be a way for you to get there if it's an essential thing. So often what might happen is, you as the pilot or the dispatcher will get a question from the company saying, hey, can we actually go to Holland? And yeah, okay, you can go and look at the websites and stuff, but then you get into this thing about, well, what about the crew? What about whatever else? I'll move on to the next question, which is associated, and then I'll try and open it up for more questions. And that's about the 72-hour test for airline travel. This is a real pain in the ass. There's no other way to put it. A lot of airlines are saying, yeah, you're welcome to come fly with us. This is not a question of whether you're entitled to enter the country or not. This is about a 72-hour prior PCR test. And the problem with the 72-hour prior PCR test is you can only get that test within 72 hours of the flight, but it has to be a PCR test, not one of these rapid tests. And because it's a PCR test, it has to go to a laboratory to be processed, and it takes time. And often, especially in the United States, it can take a long time to get those results. And that puts you in a difficult position, because you book a flight, you go get the test, you don't know if you're going to get the results in time. My initial advice on that would be this. There are places, especially in the major cities, where you can go and get a quick turnaround. That's less than 24 hours or 24 hours. But you've really got to do your research. I don't know if anyone has any quick experiences to share on that. Any thoughts on that? You're welcome. Unmute yourself and jump in.
So we did a this is Steve. We did a practice test to France. We actually have some 3 of our techs that are over there right now undergoing some helicopter maintenance training at Airbus. So we kind of ran, and myself and another pilot, we went through a group that promised 72 hours, actually 48 to 72 hours. And the issue was you got to ship it also. So they're promising 72 hours from when they receive it. So I think the place that we found was going to be a little problematic, and they didn't deliver to the lab on Sundays. So there's always a little something. There are ways around it. I found locally here, if you can get the proper permissions, that's the whole thing, from your provider, you can get, like you were saying, the 24 to 48. So we had, and it helps for France anyway, it helps if you have some connections and say you're going for Airbus training, they can work with the French embassy to get you those permissions, and so that you can fly there directly if you need to. So that kind of connection actually helps. But you're right, the testing is, and then depending on who you talk to, is it 72 hours, especially for a private flight, is it 72 hours prior to flight, or is it 72 hours prior to arrival in France? Our information for our fake flight was that it was 72 hours prior to arrival in France, which for France, that makes sense. So that bumps it back even more. So for the airline travel, I think it's one thing, and for private, it just kind of depends. So it's still, and then that was 2.5 weeks ago. I understand that France is tightening up again. So as I say, with anything in the COVID verse, that's only good for another 25 minutes, and then things may change.
It does. And the thing I want to highlight on that is make sure, if you are in that case, whether it's for airline or some other thing, make sure you know the difference between a PCR and a rapid test. These rapid tests are various, but the efficacy, accuracy is below 50%. In other words, 1 in 2 people won't show even if they do have the virus. The PCR test, and I won't attempt to tell you what it stands for, but that's the real deal, and it's about 85%. And really, it's how far progressed. COVID works like a cold does, right? It kind of progresses through the body at a certain way. So you can get tested, have it, but it doesn't show yet in the nose, in the nasal cavity. I will also say it is not a pleasant experience. It's survivable, but whatever. If you've ever seen a COVID testing stick, it's about, I don't know if that's going to show, like it's about that long at least. And there's a reason it's that long, and you'll find out when you go for it. But that's the situation there. I want to keep moving through the things, so that we can all the different bits and pieces that we,
Hey, Mitch, sorry, Mark, can you hear me? It's Nat.
Various people trying to jump in. I'm just going to ask you just to hold on for a second. I'm going to mute everybody for a second because there's a few mics there. I'm going to come back for some more stuff on the PCR testing. There's a couple more things that I want to do. What I will remind you, by the way, is if you have a question, stick it into the chat window as well. That also works, that we can see it and work through it. Your mileage will vary on this wherever you are in the world. Every place has got a slightly different way of doing it and the requirements and so on. But the important thing is it can be done in most major places. Ruben, thank you. It's a polymerase chain reaction test. Anyway, PCR, make sure that's the one that you're getting, because that's what's required for at least the airlines and maybe more. Okay, let's get back to the slide thing for a second. The situation on Europe is clear and unclear, but it is developing very rapidly. So if that's where you're going, make sure that you're looking at that closely. Okay. These are some of the questions that we want to get into. Some we've addressed, but these are the ones that people have kind of suggested, you know, in response to the emails and so on. I'm just going to read out a couple of comments from people before we move on. Phil says, we used Medaire to set up a quick result PCR test for one of our pilots so that he could airline out of Germany heading to the Philippines. It was very helpful and got the results quickly. Tom says, flew to Tahiti from the US. All crew were able to get PCR results within 48 hours of the test. And those tests were done in Denver and Dallas. And I think that that will kind of, you know, transmit across to most major cities in the US where you'll be able to do that. New York, obviously, in my experience, it's possible at various places to get results in less than 24 hours. If you are in New York and you need to get a test, your friend is Laboratory Q in Brooklyn, a very interesting place, but they will give you a test within 24 hours. And Nat says, be sure you have a solid testing program and protocol for your operation. Think about the isolation and testing, not only for your departure, but on return. Sure thing. Josh has an update around Farnborough that the restaurants are closing early. This will be a thing in Europe. In Ireland, there will be no restaurants very shortly. Holland has closed all bars and cafes. Germany, not so much, but that's evolving rapidly. Okay, those questions we're going to come back to. Let's do some fun stuff. We have two new people, Beck and Chris, and I think what we'll do first is go to this slide. Is that, hang on a second. Is that sharing or not? It's not. How about now? Everyone seeing that? You seeing some pictures? Okay, good. Chris is joining us from Auckland in New Zealand. He's been with us for a couple of months on the OpsGroup team, and Chris is awesome, as is Rebecca, who joined us about a month ago, and Rebecca's in Dubai. And one of the great things about this call is that we're able to have all four of us, Dave, myself, Chris and Rebecca, all four of the ops people at least, on the call at the same time, which is a real challenge. But we thought we'd just do a little photo intro, and then what we're going to do is a little 30-second intro from each of them. So this is the professional set of pictures. This is what we look like in our professional lives, but you know OpsGroup, we're all about the other side of the operation, which is the not so professional. So we thought we'd share these pictures with you as well. You can probably work out who's who. That's Chris on the bottom right there. Chris still has a MySpace account, by the way. So I guess if I'm saying that, you're also able to go and have a look at it. But these are the OpsGroup team in less than professional environs. I'm not sure what Dave is doing there, but I like this. Scotty does this with the IOC stuff, and I love it when Scotty gets stuck into like just the random kind of, you know, pictures that don't necessarily make sense. But we'll go back to this part here, and I will stop sharing, and Rebecca and Chris are both going to do a little 30-second where they are, what they do, what they did before, and say hello to you guys. Whoever wants to go first, go for it.
Oh, hey guys, my name's Chris. I'm the one with the MySpace account, unfortunately. I'm down in Auckland in New Zealand, which is why I have this strange accent. I'm a Kiwi, and I've been with OpsGroup for a few months now. In terms of my flying background, I've got about 8 years flying the A320 here in New Zealand and in Australia as well, across the Pacific. Before I worked for Air New Zealand and another airline called Jetstar, I come from a GA background as well. So I used to instruct. And I guess in terms of outside of flying, I love anything that involves being outside in the outdoors, so skiing, hiking, surfing, that kind of thing. So it's really, really cool to have the opportunity to work with you guys, and I'm looking forward to more of that as well.
That sounds fantastic, Chris, but that's not what your MySpace account depicts, eh? There's a lot more activities there than hiking and mountaineering, eh?
The MySpace account, it's been a while since I've logged into it, but very much still visible. So I'm probably a little bit worried about that, I think.
Okay, cool. Congratulations, by the way, on your new Prime Minister. Fantastic news. Well done. We're all delighted. Beck, I guess you're next.
Hi, yeah, hi everyone. It's nice to see so many people from all over the world on here. That's really cool. Yeah, I'm originally from the UK. I've been living in Dubai for 5.5 years. Was flying the 380 and the 330 before that with Emirates. And previous to that, I worked for CityJet, if anyone's heard of it. Very small airline based in London City Airport, flying the old Avro RJ 85s, the Jumbolinas. So a bit of worldwide experience and a bit of European experience. And now I'm in the process of moving back from Dubai. So big, messy boxes, stuff going on behind me. I'll be back in the UK start of November at this point. Yeah, and saying I had the common sense to make my Instagram and my Facebook accounts private. So there's no way Mark can get to the very many embarrassing videos and photos on there.
Okay.
I'm also pretty into outdoorsy stuff, wakeboarding, skiing, but I'm terrible at it. So the vast majority of my online videos are me falling over in various embarrassing ways. So that's going to remain locked forever, I think, at this point.
That's sensible. Yeah, Chris will have followed your lead on that, I think. Okay, cool. Welcome, both of you. And it's just great to have the opportunity to say hello. And so when you're writing emails to team@ops.group for the question of the day or whatever you're stuck on, which, by the way, I invite you to do. If there's anything that you're not sure about or you're stuck on, please do that. Just ping us an email. And if we like it, we'll reply. I know we'll reply to most of them. Get about a 99% response rate there. So that's awesome. Beck and Chris, thank you. We're back on the slides. And now we have something even more important. Guy Gribble. Guy has been with us since day one of OpsGroup, and I looked back at the people that joined on day one a couple of weeks ago, and it's amazing. You know, it feels like a long time. It's only four and a half years ago, but I look back and I was like, wow, that's incredible. Guy joined us on day one. Guy has been an absolute standout member of OpsGroup. And to give a proper introduction, what I thought I would do was show this little presentation, show a couple of things about Guy. So this is a picture of Guy in his normal habitat in the latter stage of his career, which is in the left seat of something large, and it might be a 7.6 and it might be a 7.5, I'm not entirely sure. But this little gallery is a little snapshot from various stages of Guy's flying career. And believe it or not, that is Guy's first solo aircraft up in the top left. So Guy has had an absolutely incredible history in aviation. You read people's bios and you read different things, but Guy has basically done it all. A6 intruder attack pilot, deployed on the USS Midway aircraft carrier, the Navy, Naval Reserves, then got into American Airlines, the DC-9, onto the larger aircraft, then back onto the 7.5, 7.6, and then back onto the DC-9 as captain, and back to the 7.5 and 7.6, all over the world, as you would imagine. But more critically than that, and most importantly, I think what we see in the group is that every day Guy is there monitoring the questions that people have in this group, and he's always got an answer, whatever your question is, and it's always superbly referenced. So I would say if I was to add up all of the answers that Guy has given people over the years, it would number at least in the hundreds, probably 500 plus. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people on this call that have had a question that Guy has popped up and answered for you. And, I think it's a critical thing. I had a brief chat with Guy before the call here for about 10 minutes. And we kind of recognize that in international ops and in aviation, there aren't that many people focusing on the type of work that's being done here, which is informing people and making people aware of the rules and changes and the risks and so on. And in doing so, you never get to know what incidents you prevent from happening, whether that's something on your license, whether that's something to the aircraft. And I want to, tip my hat to Guy and just say a tremendous thank you for all of the input, all of the work, all of the help, always done in this spirit of selflessness, generosity, humility. So it's just been a real pleasure for me for the last 4 years to have had Guy in the group. Guy has also done tremendous work with NBAA, IOC, you know, behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, doing presentations, just brilliant. So I want to say thank you. And Guy, if you're still happy to, I'd love you to say a few words and say hello to the group. And yeah, the floor is yours. But from me, a very personal thank you for everything that you've done for us here. OpsGroup would not be the same without you, 100%.
Well, I'm speechless. And for those of you out there that know me better, that's not a common occurrence. Yesterday, I was awarded a certificate of appreciation for my service to the IOC, and that was wonderful. And it truly stuck the heartstrings to me, and that the peer group will recognize the volunteerism, the hard work, the enjoyment I got out of that. On top of that was an award that will be given out at the IOC based upon my name. So there will be a award at the IOC, the Guy Gribble NBAA IOC award. And that just took the wind out of my sails. You guys know how to make a poor boy from California feel real welcome. And I truly appreciate the concern, the ideas, the professional attitude that I've come to enjoy out of this. One of the things that I want to share right now is the reason why I'm leaving and shutting down my business is because of a cancer diagnosis. That diagnosis came in 7 years ago and gave me 3 to 5 years to live. I've pushed that out to 7 years with excellent care and excellent insurance payments. So for the men in the crowd, I would say between a finger wave and a PSA test, you've got a pretty much 100% certainty whether you've got this benign hyperplasia or a no-kidding cancer diagnosis from your prostate. For the women in the crowd, the men that you know over a certain age, press them to go get this. It's been proven time and again that men are not going to go into a doctor, and it's the females in their lives that push them to go do this. My wife is what pushed me into it, and had it not been, I wouldn't have been able to get 7 years out of this. So I am in hospice care. My voice is very hoarse because I spent most of the night, let's just say, blowing and going. Leave it at that. And with that, that's pretty much going to be my life, better living through chemistry inside a hospice. Now, if you're not familiar with hospice, it means that you've got 6 months or less to live, and they expect the end of life not to have any kind of palliative care, any kind of trying to cure the disease. They're making you comfortable. And that comfort comes in anti-vomiting drugs, anti-constipation drugs, and lots of really great opiates. The joke is, you go to the hospital to get better. You don't go to the hospital to get rest. You go home to get rest, and you go to hospice to get some really great opiates. So I'm not in any pain. The end of life is coming sooner than I thought, but that's the way of the world. And I don't want anybody boo-hooing or gnashing their teeth and saying, oh, woe be him. Like Mark put together, I've had a great life, flying wise. One part that did not come out in that was my time as a helicopter pilot and as a civilian flight instructor. So I flew Army helicopters prior to that. And I've had just a well-rounded career. And it's pros like you guys here that make me want to get better and do more. And it's the human element that is on the IOC that just got to my heart yesterday. You guys really did. So thank you for everything. And you're not going to go unknown by me. You're a part of the legacy in my life.
Thank you, Guy. You know,
Mark, we had this discussion about what's important, and I can tell what's important in life is the same thing that's important to you. And please do not imagine that I'm being cut short. If we all have a Christian faith, we're all going to meet up yonder someday. And that is going to be the Valhalla, Nirvana, Christian heaven, whatever you want to call it.
100%. Yeah, you know, we chatted for 10 minutes before this call, and it's a mark of Guy's humility. You know, I said, I want you to say whatever you want to say. But Guy said to me, I don't want to go on for too long. You know, there's things that are important and there's things that are not. And this is one of those moments that you realize the value of the community. I've seen it in the last couple of weeks. You know, with the IOC, did amazing work to get together, and there was a real sense that we wanted to do something really as a massive mark of respect to Guy, and it makes me incredibly proud that there's going to be an award that has Guy Gribble's name on it in eternity, you know, and the fact it is that award is for outstanding contribution, and that's everything that Guy is, you know, it's outstanding contribution. And I really appreciate you taking the time to say those words, or having the courage to say those words, Guy, and having the courage to come on the call and you know, be honest and frank and clear, and also be very involved in it still, you know. And I know that in the coming weeks and months that for you, this will still be your community, and you will still be here and be part of it, and it'll keep you going as well. And I think that's really important. And I'm going to echo, you know, Guy had one message he wanted to get across there, and that is go and get a checkup, guys, you know, and women, go and, you know, whatever men are in your life, go and get them to do that, because wow, you know, that's the difference right there, you know. So Guy, I just salute you. Like I said, I found out about this 3-4 weeks ago. I hadn't known. I had suspected, but I hadn't known. And it was a real thing for me to go through, you know, just to acknowledge that in you. So, wow, if I can have your courage when it comes to my time, whatever that looks like, to come on and to talk to close to 200 people and pass on that message, I you know, my hat's off to you. So thank you, Guy. Thank you so much. And Mitch, you know, you're my right-hand man at the moment in this particular call, and I'd love you to say a few words if you wouldn't mind. You've been a rock going through this as well, and you know, this is such a big deal. The international ops community is small; it's very small. And Guy, you've seen that. You've seen the same group of people over and over and over again. You know, and Mitch is.
I don't think it's as small as tight knit. I mean, we all are sharing. We all are thinking about what to do to get better at this. I did not see that in my 121 world. It was show up, execute, go home. And this is where I really wanted to find a home, and I did. I found a tight-knit group of folks that are challenging each other to up their game. And it just, you know, God put me in the right place at the right time to get the last part of my life very valuable to me personally. And you guys are a big part of that value to the last part of my life.
Thank you, Guy. Yeah, Mitch, would you like to say a few words?
Well, it's difficult. I just say that you're defined by difficult times. Difficult times really show special people, and Guy's a special person. A lot of people stood up for him. That's all I got to say.
Thanks, Mitch. Yeah. Well, I'm delighted that you came on the call. I'm delighted that we've been able to have this call, in your honor, Guy, and that you're a full part of it and participating as always and knowledgeable as always. And thank you very much. And some of you guys and girls on the call probably don't know Guy and haven't met Guy, and it's not the point, the point is that in this community that we have, sometimes we come together for particular reasons, and this is what we're coming together for today. And we care about each other an awful lot, whether we know them or whether we don't. But that's the whole ethos here, is the very founding of this group came out of the tragedy of Malaysia 17, and I don't know any of the people on that flight, and I don't know any of the people affected by it and their families, but it could have been me. And in Guy's case, that could also be me, Guy, and I think we realize that, and that's what makes us all human, and having the ability to share in that is fantastic. So yeah, thank you once again for coming on the call. We'll all be thinking of you. Okay, it's very hard to move back to operational topics after that, and we don't have to. We can, as ever, this is a chat. We've talked about some pretty specific things in international ops. We've got through quite a few questions. We've looked at some of the big areas, and we've talked about some very important things, and especially just now. To me, that's why I love the chat side of this. It's not a presentation, it's not a webinar, it's not a conference, it's not about professionalism and suits and ties and all the stuff. It's really just about keeping each other safe and informed and working together as a group of people. And it's incredible to have 100 and odd people, 140 right now, and probably 200 in total that want to come on a call like this and talk about stuff. And I'd love it to be more interactive. I wish there's a way for 200 people to be able to have a couple of minutes each time. It's difficult, but you're always welcome to speak up if there's something that you kind of want to bring up and talk about. And that's the whole point with this international ops thing. Like that's what we do, but there's ways of doing it. And to me, a lot of the stuff that we see in international ops doesn't feel very human, and it's not done in our interest, and it's not done in our favor. The stuff that's published, the language that's used, the way it's done, I think there's a lot that we can change on that. And I'm not going to start on a aviation political rant, but really there is an awful lot that we can do, and that's the spirit of this group, and I just think it's fantastic. I think we should probably wrap it up here on that note, because it's been such a special call, and I kind of want to preserve that atmosphere for this particular call. We are a group of people who can do amazing things, and we will continue to do amazing things, and we have done. We've, like I said, it's a community. We keep each other safe and informed. That's the message. That's everything here. That's the only thing. Whatever's good for all of us, is good for any one of us. So once again, salute to Guy. I'm delighted we were able to do this. Thank you for sharing in this. It's a special moment. We all have sent our best regards, and I see in the chat window, if you're watching this later in a playback, there's been an awful lot of just beautiful comments in the chat window. So thank you to everybody for joining us tonight. We will do another one of these very soon in November. We've had a bit of a gap, but it's allowed us to kind of get reorganized and do a better version of the chat. So in the meantime, thanks very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to see you all. And I look forward to the next time that we all come together. And Guy, I hope you'll join us on the next call as well. So we'll do a little wave as usual to say goodbye to everybody. Thanks for jumping on. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening, and take care of each other. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.